it's important to make these positive changes. It's important that those with disabilities do have full access. It's a human right. Why would we want to do anything other than that?
Hi, and welcome to the HearSay podcast. I'm your host, Mike Paciello, Chief Accessibility Officer at AudioEye. Joining us on our show today is Scott Trachtenberg, CEO of ADA Site Compliance, which was recently acquired by AudioEye. Scott has held numerous leadership positions both in and out of the accessibility industry, including Startup Your Passion, Delivery Wow, and the Entrepreneurs Organization. For the last 8 years, he's been working closely with companies to ensure that their digital content is compliant and accessible with the accessibility laws and minimizing their legal risk. His impressive experience in this area is just one of the reasons why we're so excited to have him here with us today on the show. Scott, welcome to HearSay. Hey, listen, let's get right into a little bit of your background because you're not from an accessibility background. Tell us about what you've been doing and what you were doing before you got into the accessibility field and started ADA Site Compliance.
I spent most of my career in the food delivery space, similar business, Uber Eats, Grubhub, DoorDash. I was a dinosaur of that industry, started a business in 1995. Had a sale to a .com, came back in, grew that business, and eventually was able to exit when the larger players came in. A lot of money flowed into the space.
Yeah, and I understand it correctly. You're also a grad from Harvard Business School, right?
I did a certification program at Harvard Business School. Great experience from an entrepreneurial standpoint. What we did were a lot of case studies looking at businesses, mostly what were at a point large businesses, some that scaled and were uber successful, others that scaled were uber successful at a point, and some of those that ended up out of business, and the reasons of why, the differentiators of why certain businesses are able to scale and succeed and others ultimately fail.
Excellent. Very good. I think a lot of what we're going to discuss today is probably things that you've learned as a result of that certification, as well as helping us to better understand the business of accessibility as a whole. But what inspired you to start up ADA Site Compliance? What challenges were you immediately faced with trying to solve?
Yeah, I'll give just a little backstory. I was selling the food delivery business, or in the process of selling that, and I was served with legal docs. And when I reviewed the docs, it was the plaintiff was someone who's blind, and they were filing a legal complaint against us because our website was not accessible to them. And it was actually my first experience of even understanding that that was a thing. As I read the legal docs, I thought to myself, oh, someone who's blind actually use my website? Is this a real thing? And I started to dig into it, mostly out of interest, because it made perfect sense. Of course, digital content should be fully accessible to everyone. And for those with disabilities that at times, potentially are homebound, or it's not necessarily easy for somebody to just hop in a car and go, especially for someone who's blind, can't drive. It made sense that digital content should be accessible to them and hopefully should improve their quality of life by being able to navigate the web, order items that they need online, and so forth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, again, more often than not, it's the service-based industries, the storefronts, the food chains, the grocery, government services and things like that, where there is a high level of activity, of interaction by anyone, never mind a person with a disability, that you're more likely to run into scenarios like you did with your business, with the blind trying to get in and I guess acquire something or purchase something, they couldn't do it.
Yeah, it was a food delivery service. They wanted to order from the restaurants that we worked with. It made perfect sense, right? And also, that business did quickly sell, after that litigation came through. But should have been a vertical that we went after, and could have made substantial business for us. And likewise for a lot of businesses out there that, somewhat, ignore, disregard, or maybe they just don't know any better, that the disabled population has huge buying power.
Right. So How so I get the bridge, I get the connection, you get a lawsuit, you get confronted with that, now you gotta deal with it. But how did that actually, lead you to, launching ADA site compliance?
So after selling the food delivery business, I had time and I really started to dig in on how does digital accessibility work? What does this all mean? How do you make a website accessible? How do you make an app accessible, documents accessible? And I just put a lot of time into it, just more out of curiosity than anything else. And I also started speaking with friends that own businesses or were executives of businesses, telling them my story of what happened, and also telling them the importance of ensuring that their digital content was accessible, not only to ensure that everyone has access to that content, but also from a legal standpoint. And people were really curious about it and began asking me for help correcting issues that they had. Friends of friends even started calling and saying, "Hey, so and so told me that you had this issue, and I want to make my stuff accessible, and I don't want to get sued or receive a demand letter." And the light bulb sort of went off that, maybe there's a business opportunity here. And one of the most important things and whatever I was going to do next from a career standpoint was I feel great about what I was doing every day. I wanted to feel like I was helping the world in my own little way. And this business or this opportunity checked a lot of boxes for me and decided to take a leap. Even though I'm not a techie and it's a highly technical business, I decided to take a leap into it. And the business very quickly began to grow. And first hire was a CTO. It was highly technical. And the business was great. It was everything that I hoped that it would be. And still continued to love the space, love the industry, and love what I do every day.
Yeah, it's cool how, what I call fear-based incentives work. In this way, it worked in a very positive way for you to launch a business that became very successful. As you launch this business, now you said right out of the box, you're not a technical person, so you gotta get someone on staff who is technical. But what other challenges did you find that you were facing, with the company?
Well, there's always challenges in businesses and there's ups and downs, right? The ebb and flow of life. Not being technical in a technical business was a little bit difficult. I think also helped me maintain the seat of CEO and to not participate in everything that was going on in the business and get super granular in the business because I'm also not a very granular thinker, not necessarily the best implementer. Those are traits, often that people who are entrepreneurial have. I'm more of a visionary. I love coaching and mentoring. I love brainstorming. But so keeping myself in the role of things that I thought or know that I'm really good at, and letting others that are much better at doing other things handle those tasks without me really standing over their shoulder, because honestly I didn't even have the ability to do that in a lot of what was going on in the business,
Yeah.
especially on the technical side.
Did you find, well, your work primarily again was mostly from a manual standpoint, right? I mean, you built some platforms in terms of sales and marketing and things along that line. But in terms of the actual work, your team, I imagine, did a lot of manual assessments and did the enhancements and recommendations a typical way, right? Write a report, tell them what the problems were, and how to correct the problems. Does that capture it?
Yeah, that's really what we specialized in, was human auditing of digital content, mostly websites, but we did, many apps and a lot of document work as well, PDF work, and also remediation. So actually fixing those items or working alongside, somebody at a business or a team at a business or at a government to help them as they were going through the process of fixing those items.
Yeah, so that leads to my next question. So why AudioEye? AudioEye is all about AI and automation. By and large, that's what the company, builds its reputation on. A very different model. We definitely include usability testing, user testing, and AT testing as part of of our total package, so to speak. But from your perspective, why AudioEye? Why automation?
Audio has amazing technology, and I never really could afford the time or financially to build something that could be competitive. And they've come up with what I felt and now certainly know is the right formula in the space, which is utilizing technology and pushing that as far as you can and continually making improvements upon that, but also understanding that manual testing, so human auditing and remediation are very, very important in the process. So it's the combination of having both of those things. We did build technology, scanning software that could scan a website and find about a third of the issues, but didn't have a platform like AudioEye that can actually fix, so that it monitors 24/7 and can actually do the fixing.
Right. So that was not necessarily something that was germane to ADA's core sense of business. Now you've got the technology to kind of complement your human intervention and your staff experts along those lines. Did you
Yeah, and there are some other pieces, Mike, when you ask, why AudioEye? Because were other opportunities in the space with, competing businesses, uh, outside financing, private equity. So there were other opportunities for me. I wanted to stay in the space. That was really important from a personal side. I feel so fortunate to truly enjoy what I do every day. I'm happy to get out of bed and go to work. Most people, unfortunately can't say that, but I enthusiastically say that. So I really did want to stay in the space and continue on the mission that I've been on now for almost 8 years. And also the team members at AudioEye that I knew, that includes you, Mike, are amazing people and really knowledgeable and share a similar passion towards ensuring that all digital content is fully accessible and usable. So it was the right fit for me. And now that I'm part of the AudioEye team, even more so, the culture is amazing. The people are great. They really care about the clients. They want to continue to grow the business, improve the technology, improve the processes. So everything has really actually been even better than what I had hoped that it would be.
That's good. That's great to hear. Look, one of the things that I think is crucial to our business is to have case studies, right? Do you have any that you could share with us from your time with ADA site compliance? Things that I think will be interesting to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. The one that I have the most pride in, uh, we were working with a client hand in hand, doing manual testing and remediation of their website, and they really cared. Their team, it wasn't only on the compliance side of, we don't want to get sued, but they really cared for the end users and ensuring that everything was fully accessible. And so they put all this time and energy in and received a lawsuit. And it's disheartening when that happens to people that are attempting to do things the right way. So we got the lawsuit from their outside counsel and we reviewed all of the items that were named by the plaintiff and plaintiff's attorney. And we were able to dispel all of them. We went back and reviewed the website and we disagreed with every single one of them. And we actually went back to the defense counsel and said, you really need to go back to this plaintiff's counsel and tell them that they're absolutely 100% wrong. And we wouldn't say that unless we knew that. And they went back to plaintiff's counsel. Plaintiff's counsel said, I'm going to have our plaintiff do a deep dive into the website. Plaintiff's counsel, of course, wanted the plaintiff to find stuff. They wanted to be able to come back and say, nope, you're wrong.
Right.
Well, the email that we got back from defense counsel had a quote from plaintiff's counsel from the plaintiff that said, I love this website. It's the best website I've ever been on. Wow. What a sense of pride we had in that. It felt great to know that we're doing things the right way, but it emphasized that it's actually working, that someone who's blind was able to fully navigate that website because all of the work was put into it.
Scott, there's got to be some advice there. I think that that you could give to all of us in terms of, lawsuit, litigation, not lawsuit avoidance, but I guess to a certain degree, that's really what we're talking about here, because um, sadly, these lawsuits are not going away. They're being filed left and right, thousands per year, and so what advice would you give prospective website owners and businesses who may find themselves, vulnerable to a lawsuit of this nature?
Yeah, there's a few pieces, and having been through it myself, it's, do you want to do the right thing, right? Once you're aware, are you now going to fix things? Are you going to do things the right way to ensure that it's fully accessible and usable for everyone? There's also improvements that happen to the website from an SEO standpoint and usability standpoint for all users, not just those with disabilities when we go through this process. So there's a lot of good that happens. Uh, yes, litigation is a negative. Nobody wants to receive a demand letter or receive a lawsuit. There's been a lot of positive change that is driven by litigation. If the plaintiff's attorneys never started to file lawsuits in this space, our progress in this space would be minimal. We've seen significant progress. You go on most websites now, especially, I would say almost all large businesses have accessibility policies in the footer of their websites. That was very uncommon 7 years ago. So things are improving. It's unfortunate that it has to be driven by litigation, but if that's what it takes, that's what it takes, right? It's important to make these positive changes. It's important that those with disabilities do have full access. It's a human right. Why would we want to do anything other than that? I understand that not everybody's aware, just like I wasn't aware, right? Once I was aware 8+ years ago, I did the right thing and put a lot of effort, time, and money into fixing my website as best as I possibly could. So I understand that there's multiple sides of this. There's another piece to it also, Mike, and I'm sure that you see this a lot, but over time, especially over the last 2 to 3 years, the vast majority of litigation that's referred into us to help them fix their digital content, they've tried to do something. They thought that they were doing the right thing. They Google searched, they found a website that told them, put this line of code on your website and it's going to be fixed. And ultimately what it was a widget that, sure, it can help in some minimal ways, but certainly not going to make the website fully accessible. So there is knowledge there from most clients that are being referred into us now. So at least knowledge is building. They may have gone through the process in the wrong way. And, it's not a great conversation to have with somebody that says, I thought that I was doing the right thing. I thought that I had this fixed. I went on this website and it told me that this is all that I needed to do. And then we have to explain, well, no, there's a lot more that goes into that. Yes, you can use great technology to help in the process, but you also have to do manual testing and remediation.
Yeah, I think those are great points, Scott. A couple of things that I just picked out of it. So first and foremost, there is no magic bullet. There is no one size fits all. We're dealing with, persona types of a number of different types of people with disabilities, and so their needs and their interaction needs are going to be different. Certainly, a blind person and a deaf person have completely different needs. Just to, kind of put it in the easiest way to understand. But there's something else that you did yourself when you received the lawsuit, and I think this use case that you talked about, I think is also critical, and that is our response, our initial response. You get that lawsuit, and you get the piece of paper right there, and you get served with it, and so often people want to fight rather than sit back and say, well, wait a minute, maybe there's some validity here. Let me look and see what I've got. Let me go do a little research, like you said. And I may not get all of the answers right up front, but at least I can start to engage with, the plaintiff, so to speak, and have a meaningful conversation. Because my experience has been whenever dealing with plaintiffs or lawyers, generally speaking, if you're willing to play ball, if you're willing to cooperate and work with them, usually things come out much better for you in the long run. And you're likely to get a letter like the one that you received because ultimately they went and did their homework themselves and said and then related a very positive experience from using that website. So I
Yeah.
do think it's better to be agreeable than being disagreeable and work with them, and that'll go a long way.
Yeah, it's a great point, all around there. Sometimes you have to recognize that you're wrong. In that instance, when I received the litigation, I was wrong, 100%. I didn't know about it. but that doesn't matter in the law. I was wrong. So then what are your action steps? Do you try and fight? Are you bitter about it? Or do you do the right thing? And do you correct your wrongs? And that's what I attempted to do, was to correct my wrongs. And I agree with you around the plaintiff's attorneys. Yeah, if you try and take a hard line with them, that's going to only make them want to fight harder. And ultimately it's going to cost you more money, not only in a likely settlement agreement with that plaintiff's attorney, but you also are likely going to have an attorney that's defending you, and it's just going to take that much more time. So in terms of settling these sorts of lawsuits and demand letters, I would suggest move as quickly as you can to the settlement and as quickly as you can into getting your issue corrected.
Yeah, excellent advice. I always think back to Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. Not sure if you read that one, but one of the things he said, the mark of a great leader, whether you're a company or a person, is humility. So if you go into these scenarios with humility, being willing to, be forgiving, or, to apologize and be apologetic, and have that, it'll go a long way, and you'll get these things resolved. And of course, as you said earlier, the most important thing here is that we're making things usable and accessible to people with disabilities, because they're the ones that actually lose when everyone else fights. It just makes better sense to be cooperative. Let me switch gears a little bit, just a little bit here, because I do want to tackle this legal, thread, if you will, that you and I are kind of going down to. So, a lot of ADA site compliance work is the result of legal referrals, if I have that right. So, what are some of the common accessibility issues that your referrals are approaching you with?
Yeah, I mentioned, one of the biggest things that I'm seeing more recently is that they thought that they had it fixed, but they didn't, right? They were misguided in their attempts. In terms of actual items, I use some common ones that are relatively easy to understand. Again, for me being non-technical, although we can go down the rabbit hole if we really wanted to, but some of the common things would be color contrast ratio. So if you ever look at a website and it's a little bit hard to read, you're looking at it in the background and the font colors are too close in contrast. So let's just say it's a dark blue background with a dark green font. That doesn't meet color contrast ratio. So we see that named in lawsuits often. And another one that's named in almost every lawsuit are improper tags of photos on websites, and even for buttons and similar items, that the tags have to be descriptive, so that someone who's blind using screen reader software that'll actually read the website to them, that it'll tell them that's a button, and then the tag should tell them exactly what the button is. So if it's the home button, then it should be labeled as such. What had happened in the past, and a lot of times often still happens, is that the search bots would look at those tags, and the tags would be made specifically for the bots that were searching websites to say, and I'm making it up, but let's just say it's an Italian restaurant, that home buttons tag would say the best Italian restaurant in New York City. So it had nothing to do with what the button actually was intended for. The good news is that the search engines, specifically Google, have recognized that, and they no longer use the tags in their searching for rankings, because they can't. It doesn't make any sense to.
Right, right. Yeah, so those are good points, Scott. I appreciate that, and certainly the folks that are listening in on it. There are just a few things that are just very common. Captioning for video for the deaf, colors, as you said, screen color, color contrast. Form fields tend to be something you have to work on. Sometimes tables and design at that level, but by and large, usually I find that most sites suffer from the same 8 to 10 errors. Then after that, you got to do a deeper dive to figure out some of the more programmatic issues that may be coming up. And now you're talking about ARIA, or maybe just talking about some stronger HTML, as you were talking about the objects and the control buttons at that level. But by and large, it's usually the bigger all text on images, form fields, things like that should be relatively easy to make accessible for anyone that has a website. So good, that's good. I appreciate that advice. So we're almost there going into 2025. What are you thinking that the momentum for digital accessibility will be over the next year? What are we going to be looking at? What will be some of the challenges that we're going to be looking at in terms of the accessibility profession, and some of the things that you think will be, big wins and big pluses for our industry?
It's hard to separate litigation from accessibility because litigation drives a lot of what's happening on the accessibility side, right? That it's somewhat forced. So with that being said, the Department of Justice rolling out a new Title II rule so that governments must ensure that all of their digital content is accessible, either in 2025 or 2026, depending on the size of that entity. But that's hugely impactful. The DOJ has made it as clear can be that digital content is part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The waters had always been a little muddied because of court rulings going in different directions around that, but they've been very, very clear. And they are now forcing the hand of all governments to ensure that their digital content is accessible. Also, it's going to be really hard for any business that receives litigation to make the argument that it's not part of the Americans with Disabilities Act, based on what the Department of Justice has done, because now there's precedents.
Right.
And it's likely that Title III, which is governing businesses, that the DOJ will also come out with rulemaking, which will be substantially similar to Title II, whether or not with the new administration that going on hold potentially, yeah, that could happen, but it's very, very likely to come out at some point. So what does all of that do? Well, that drives action to fix. It also likely opens up the floodgates for plaintiffs' attorneys, that we're going to see a dramatic uptick in litigation. These are my assumptions. There's no fact around it, but knowing that the plaintiffs' attorneys, they latch onto these things, and good, bad, or indifferent. It's just what tends to happen. And they're going to latch onto this. I'm sure that behind the scenes, they're preparing for those dates in 25 and 2026 when the Department of Justice has made it clear that all governments have to have their content be fully accessible, and that they're ready to file litigation, and likewise against businesses as well, using the same logic that they would use around the government piece.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when you say all governments, we're really talking about state and local governments, not the federal. The federal is mandated by Section 508, but state and local governments, and frankly, any educational institution as well is included in part of that. They are the ones now that are on the cusp of having to meet these mandates, as you said, in 2025 and 2026, again, just depending on the size, population, and things along those lines. But it should, just based on some of my own interactions and travel and conferences, it's definitely waking people up. Why they've been sleeping, I can't figure it out. I mean, the guidelines by which everyone is supposed to be working are the same guidelines, right? It's the same guidelines coming out of the Web Accessibility Initiative Office, the WCAG guidelines. It's not new. It's being talked about, and yet, I feel there will be a mad dash and a mad rush, just like there always is, as we start to approach those deadlines.
Yeah, they have to find great companies to help them, right? They're not on an island. There's not an expectation that they're going to become an expert at digital accessibility. And that's another issue that we often see when litigation comes in, is that they try and handle it internally, or they've already begun the process internally. I would imagine that on people's job descriptions, it never mentioned digital accessibility or making a website or app or docs accessible. It takes a tremendous amount of knowledge and education. So definitely need, a company like AudioEye to come in and help provide the guidance, so that they're not on an island, because it's not something that they're just going to figure out. That's one thing that I've absolutely have found, over the course of time, is there's never been a business or a government that we've interacted with that has nailed this. That, yes, we did it internally and we did it correctly. No, they get referred into us because they've been sued or received a demand letter because unfortunately they failed. They had good intentions, but it's very intricate trying to do this work.
And I want to come back to one other thing, because as ADA expands in terms of the breadth and the width of who it applies to around digital accessibility, the other big challenge that we have, and do you agree with me, is in fact scale.
Scale's definitely an issue because if you think about what's there in terms of digital content, it's essentially never ending, right? It's great as a business opportunity. Part of the reason why I came into the space was because I knew that it could never fully be tackled, right? It's just too large. There's too many websites, too many apps, too many pages of documents. So back to hiring great experts that can walk through the process and understand how to prioritize. That's a huge part of the process. It's where do you even start? We know exactly where to start and what to prioritize and what does and doesn't matter. And in some cases, there's certain parts that don't matter. It's still usable, even if it's not recognized as absolutely meeting the standard, but it's still usable. Some of the items, an obvious place on a website, start with the homepage, right? When somebody's Google searching, that's where you're going to land, on the homepage. If you can't navigate the homepage, you're dead in the water, right? It's a non-starter. That person's leaving that website. You've lost that opportunity with that person that was on the website. So prioritizing things is hugely important to the process.
So there are some very common themes here that you and I have been talking about that make accessibility so critical. The critical need that it really is, a critical industry that we're a part of. One is, first and foremost, to make something usable and accessible, it's got to be mandated. So that's where those laws and those guidelines come in. So we've got that to back us up, not just here in the in this country, in the U.S., but it's international, everywhere you go. So that's we've got the mandates there to back us up. Second, just in terms of expertise, so we've got professional experts who understand the underlying code, understand the underlying issues, combined with the expertise associated with assistive technology users and people with disabilities too. So there's piece number two that you bring in. You bring in the expertise. They're the surgical, they're the surgeons of whatever complicated interfaces or platforms we may be dealing with. And then finally, the third piece there is scale. And scale in this case is where I believe AI and automation will be the big breadwinners in the long run, because there's no way that we can keep up. I'm always going to remember Dan Goldstein's quote about that. His real worry before he retired from one of the largest and most well-known EDA law firms out there, his worry was exactly what we're dealing with right now, and that is industry is moving at breakneck speeds. They're building 250,000 or more websites a day, and we as an industry, accessibility, can't keep up with it. Not from a manual standpoint, we won't be able to. But if we start to embed automation in accessibility into, or an AI rather, I'm sorry, artificial intelligence into the metric now, we can scale. Are we going to get all of them? Probably still not. They've got a big lead on us, but we can start taking a big chunk out of that. 96% that the WebAIM study shows are not usable and accessible to people with disabilities.
Yeah, that's a great point. That technology does play a big role and will continue to play a big role, and it'll become even more important. And yes, AI, as we're seeing here over the last 12 months or so, it's the it thing, and it will continue to be the thing that's going to drive a lot of human interaction, and will certainly help to improve digital content as time goes on. I agree. Will the manual process fully go away? Maybe at some point. I don't see that happening anytime soon. It's a combination thereof.
Yeah, neither do I. We need the experts. We need the folks with disabilities who are really great at using AT, and really understand how it works, and how to interact with it. We'll always need them, just like we'll always need surgeons, right? We'll always need those. We'll always need those experts. But automation and AI, I think, will go a long way for us to try and again to take a big chunk out of the the large population of websites that are not usable and accessible today. Hey Scott, it's been great talking with you. It obviously great to have you part of the AudioEye team. I know we've got a lot of plans moving forward, especially working on the legal front. So we look forward to working with you and seeing your leadership skills with AudioEye.
Yeah, Mike, so great to join forces with you at AudioEye and continuing to fight the good fight and continuing on our mission together. I'm really excited about it.
Sounds good. So I'm Mike Paciello with the HearSay podcast here at AudioEye. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we look forward to our next show. HearSay is produced by Sojin Rank, Mike Barton, Mariella, Paulino, and Missy Jensen. Edited by Alex Dorrier. If you enjoyed this podcast and don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.